Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredibly complex, highly consequential, and honestly, fascinating political career of Richard Nixon. We'll be relying purely on the historical record here. From his early days as a Navy lieutenant commander in World War II to his election as a congressman and then senator from California, Nixon's trajectory was nothing short of meteoric. But it's his time on the national stage that truly changed the world. So let's jump right into this journey.
To really understand this multifaceted presidency, we structured our explainer chronologically. We'll cover the first televised debates, shaping the modern world, the Nixon Shock, anatomy of Watergate, and finally, the final days.
All right, Section 1, the first televised debates, a visual turning point.
So let's rewind to 1960. The advent of television was fundamentally altering how the public evaluated their presidential candidates. Up until this exact moment in history, campaigns focused almost entirely on policy positions and party platforms. Going into the September 26th debate against John F. Kennedy, Nixon was this highly experienced public servant, and he was actually leading in the polls. But how did a seemingly trivial visual decision change the entire course of the election? Well, having recently been hospitalized for a knee injury, Nixon had lost weight and was just exhausted from a grueling campaign trail. Yet, he opted to wear a light gray suit, which completely washed out under the harsh studio lights, and he famously refused television makeup. Kennedy, on the other hand, he wore a dark suit, totally embraced the makeup, and projected this incredible youthful energy.
The divide in how the public perceived this debate was absolutely wild. Radio listeners who were focused strictly on the issues being discussed actually favored Nixon. But the 70 million people watching on TV, they were entirely swayed by Kennedy's youthful energy compared to Nixon's exhausted, pale appearance. For those TV viewers, personality traits like perceived integrity suddenly eclipsed raw policy debate. Kennedy would go on to win the election by a razor-thin margin, proving once and for all that in the television age, optics could be just as crucial as substance.
Moving on to Section 2, Shaping the Modern World. Major Presidential Achievements. After recovering from his 1960 defeat and a subsequent loss for governor of California, Nixon mounted an incredible political comeback, ultimately winning the presidency in 1968. Once in office, he championed a pretty unexpected domestic achievement. In his 1970 State of the Union, he declared, "Shall we make our peace with nature and begin to make reparations for the damage we have done to our air, to our land, and to our water?" That sentiment became his administration's defining green legacy, gaining major bipartisan support to create modern environmental policy. In an era where the nation was deeply divided by war and urban turbulence, environmental protection emerged as an incredibly significant, unifying area of domestic achievement.
The sheer velocity of his administration's early achievements was just staggering. I mean, think about it. In 1969, the world watched American astronauts make the very first moon landing. Just 1 year later, the Environmental Protection Agency was born. And then in 1972, Nixon completely shocked the globe with a diplomatic masterstroke by visiting Beijing.
And it wasn't just space and the environment. Nixon's administration dramatically shaped the modern world we live in today. Domestically, he ended the military draft and implemented the Legacy of Parks program, which converted 80,000 acres into national parks. Internationally, he thawed decades of frosty relations with Beijing. By signing the Shanghai Communique, which acknowledged the One China policy, he paved the way for normalized relations and essentially shifted the entire balance of power during the Cold War. It was a massive geopolitical pivot.
Okay, Section 3, the Nixon Shock, transforming the global economy. To really grasp what happened next, we have to talk about the Bretton Woods system. By 1971, this post-World War II financial order was showing some serious fractures. Basically, it pegged foreign currencies to the US dollar, which was itself pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. But the system was failing. Why? Because the US dollar was overvalued due to heavy foreign aid and military spending. The US simply didn't have enough gold in its vaults to cover the sheer volume of dollars circulating worldwide at that strict rate. So foreign exchange traders started selling off their dollars, which led to these really dangerous periodic runs on the US currency. So to protect the dollar from international money speculators, Nixon made a huge move. He abruptly ended the gold standard. On August 15, 1971, he addressed the nation and announced a new economic policy. This featured massive unilateral changes, including freezing wages and adding import tariffs, all intended to force trading partners to adjust their currency values and lower trade barriers.
This became known globally as the Nixon Shock. And it worked, at least in the short term. This unilateral decision successfully stabilized the domestic economy and permanently birthed the modern system of floating exchange rates. While it certainly shocked international allies who viewed it as a stark act of unilateralism, it completely transformed the global economy into the fluid, market-driven system we all recognize today.
That brings us to Section 4, Anatomy of Watergate, the Unraveling.
Despite his monumental successes and a massive landslide re-election in 1972, a domestic political espionage program would entirely dismantle his presidency. It started simply enough on June 17, 1972, when burglars were caught breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex. From there, it escalated quickly. The administration systematically destroyed evidence and literally bribed the burglars. But the televised Senate hearings gripped the entire nation, especially when they revealed a bombshell. Nixon had been secretly recording his own Oval Office conversations.
Crucially, the persistent investigation by the press ensured this story did not just disappear into the news cycle, ultimately forcing the justice system in Congress to take unprecedented action against a sitting president. Reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, famously guided by the informant known as Deep Throat, relentlessly chipped away at the administration's denials. They eventually tied the break-in directly to illegally funded campaign activities.
And finally, Section 5, the final days, resignation, and legacy.
The discovery of that voice-activated taping system in the Oval Office proved to be the absolute fatal blow to Nixon's political survival. A grueling legal battle over the release of those tapes culminated in a Supreme Court order forcing Nixon to hand them over to investigators. Once the August 5th transcript, the infamous smoking gun tape, was released, Nixon lost all remaining political support. Republican congressional leaders personally informed him that his impeachment and removal were an absolute certainty. The audio proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Nixon had personally ordered the FBI to abandon its investigation into the Watergate break-in. It was a clear-cut obstruction of justice.
Yielding to the inevitable, Nixon gave up the struggle. On August 9, 1974, he resigned, allowing Vice President Gerald Ford to succeed him and ending the immediate constitutional crisis without the need for a Senate trial.
Nixon leaves behind what has to be one of the most paradoxical legacies in American history. He balanced world-altering diplomatic and environmental triumphs against a catastrophic criminal conspiracy. He reshaped the global economy, established the EPA, and normalized relations with China. Yet the deep betrayal of the Watergate cover-up permanently shattered public trust in government. It even literally appended the suffix "gate" to controversies worldwide.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, it leaves us to ponder how history will ultimately weigh the massive achievements against the profound betrayals of the 37th president. Can a legacy of incredible global vision really coexist with such a devastating failure of domestic integrity? It's a question historians continue to fiercely debate today. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive into the historical record, and remember, keep questioning the history that shapes our world today.